Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Backlot 605 box office bonus episode. I know, right? One of these days, I'm just going to do it all just perfect forever and ever. My name is Brian, and joining me, as always, is my co-host Derrick,
Hey,
where we just like to kind of talk about different random things that are for the box office here, kind of in line with what we kind of got going on. So, what did you decide this week that we should talk about here, Derek?
yeah. So as we discussed on the main episode, one of the movies coming out in theaters this weekend is Moonfall, the latest disaster piece from our modern master of disaster, Mr. Roland Emmerich. So
Hmm.
I thought let's take a look and see at how disaster movies have played out at the box office, seeing if Mr. Emmerich can actually have a significant presence on this list or not,
Hmm.
and kind of see how that goes. So
Awesome.
that's what we're doing today.
Good. So, I guess my first question is going to be for you is what is the stipulation for you? What are the
Yep.
Derek
What's the rule?
requirements?
Yeah.
What are the rules?
So this time we actually have a very straightforward rule. I basically just pulled up the disaster movies page on Box Office Mojo, and their top 10 is the top 10 we're going to discuss. So
Okay.
obviously, some of these will have, I think you can make the case for all these movies that they do qualify enough as a disaster movie.
Hmm.
And if there is debate about that, we'll talk it through. But this list actually makes a lot of sense to me from my perspective. So
Good. They're good. Yeah, because I know that sometimes, especially with disaster movies, you can take certain things with a grain of salt or what's deemed a bigger disaster over another one and whatnot. So, that's honestly it's a good question, and it'll be an interesting to see kind of where we sit with this here.
yeah,
So with that being said, we go into our top 10 top disaster movies at the box office, and clearing number one, considering this is number one, Call Me Shocked, is James Cameron's Titanic at $659.36 million, the biggest grossing movie of all time until he topped himself with Avatar.
that is correct. I will point out that this is the lifetime gross for Titanic in the US because the first time around it made 600 million, a nice flat 600. But then a
Hmm.
decade ago they put out that 3D version which made another 59 on top of that. So it
Hmm.
is a movie that is very resilient, but of course it is a movie that was the ultimate, crowd pleaser of sorts back in the day.
Hmm.
Obviously with the Leo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet romance, that was a big component. That's where you got your teenage girls coming back week after week for that. But also, but if we talk about it specifically as a disaster movie and focusing, obviously that final half of the movie where the ship goes down slowly but surely, that received a lot of acclaim as well, and justifiably
Hmm.
so, because, it is a feat of filmmaking in and of itself to pull that off.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you figure 97 in terms of, between miniature work and special effects and stuff like that going on in the late 90s, there's lots about this movie that could have really have not been good. And I
Well,
think a lot of that attributes to James Cameron and his ability to know how to use special effects the right way and you know when to use special effects versus practical.
yeah, and to be honest, a lot of us kind of forget this, but this movie had a lot of bad buzz when it was filming. People were thinking like, "Oh, this is the," because at the time this is the most expensive movie ever made, and
Hmm.
people were thinking like, it kept getting delayed. It was supposed to come out like the summer of '97, then it got delayed to December of '97. Shades of the endless delays that we've had on the Avatar movies, and there was that real setup like, there's no way James Cameron is going to pull this off, and certainly reporters and stuff were at the helm ready to make Titanic sinking jokes about the movie itself.
Hmm.
But then the movie was good, and the movie became a huge hit and gave James Cameron the credits to do whatever he wanted, which he certainly did 12 years later with Avatar. So, it is a incredible success story. Again, this was at the top of the box office back in the day for 4 whole months, like
Hmm.
17 or 18 weeks, until, of all movies, the Lost in Space movie unseated it as number one, like
Really?
in April of '98. That of the Lost in Space movies' big claim to fame is it's the movie that knocked Titanic off the number one spot.
I'm
So
not gonna lie, that is hilarious, and that is someone who actually enjoyed that Lost in Space movie. But that's not a movie that I would expect to be like, I'm the one that dethroned Titanic.
nope, not at all. But
Wow. Coming in at number two, the Will Smith starring killer Independence Day at $306.17 million. Now this would be the one, this is our first notch into we got Roland Emmerich. The
yep,
reason why we're doing this list, hitting the top 10 of disaster movies. Um, in the same as like Moonfall here, this is one of those ones where lots of things are going on. We have a huge cast. We have the budding rising star that is Will Smith,
yep.
dominating the box office. Weirdly enough, I would never have thought that him and Jeff Goldblum would have such great chemistry in this
I
movie.
I'm surprised they haven't done anything together since.
I
It
would
feels
agree.
kind.
I would agree. I would honestly agree. Like, we got, the return of a few instances of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence for the Bad Boys and whatnot. But yeah, there should have been like a budding cop something or whatever with him and Jeff Goldblum. I think it would have just been a gold mine.
I
Good.
think I would almost want to think maybe at some point one of the guys will show up on the other guy's National Geographic, Disney Plus shows, since I believe they both have ones on there at this point.
You know
So
what? Now that you mention that, that is correct because we do have the world according to Jeff Goldblum, and I believe the Will Smith one. I don't remember what it's called, but it
it
was either coming out or just came out.
yeah, it is called Welcome to Earth.
Oh, I look forward to that. In terms of Independence Day, this is one of the ones that I remember being in high school and whatnot. This was a big deal. The marketing for this was everywhere, including your fast food and whatnot. I remember seeing this opening weekend at our Carmike here in Sioux Falls. It was a big deal. Like this was the summer movie to beat for 1996.
Oh yeah, and again, they advertised it quite a bit as a disaster movie. Again, I think when we talked about this on our Will Smith episode, we talked about the Super Bowl ad that was mainly, the shot of the White House blowing up,
Hmm.
and of course highlighting all the explosions and stuff that occur in that first act. When the aliens finally descend. So again, I mean, it set the template for what we know Roland Emmerich as because that was the first of his many uber destructive movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. Then we go into number three. We have Gravity, $2.74.09 million. This would be one of those ones where, like, granted, if you would have told me before 2013 that we would have a large grossing disaster movie with Sandra Bullock, I don't know if I would have believed you.
Yeah, I mean, this is you can make the case here where calling this a disaster movie might be a little bit of a stretch, but
Okay.
obviously the first act of this movie where like their space station blows up and Sandra Bullock is stranded makes the case for it. I mean, it's ultimately kind of more of like a survival movie more so than a true disaster movie, but
Hmm.
it has a lot of spectacle to it in that opening act, when everything kind of gets destroyed. Again, I think a big part of why this is so high on the list is because this was another one of those movies that was like, you have to see this on the biggest screen possible, or you have to see it in 3D. It's one of those very immersive type movies, not a like Avatar or something like that, that kind of help make that what it is. So,
It would be one of those ones that when I finally got an opportunity to sit down and watch this movie, it was at home and whatnot. I would agree. Like, I kind of wish I would have had the opportunity to go see this in the in the theater, just because I do think it does lends itself to a big screen viewing. So, who knows? Maybe we'll get next year. Maybe we'll get a 10th anniversary, and they'll bring it back to the theaters just for you know, a fun change, I guess.
perhaps, fingers crossed.
Perhaps. Yeah. Now we go into our number four, the one where we kind of get back into our this crap can really happen um, disaster movie, and that's Twister. At 241.72 million dollars. Bill Paxton charging the way in an amazing. I love
Yeah.
this movie. This is such a great movie.
Yeah, I mean, again, you just mentioned, like Independence Day was like the movie to beat in the summer of '96, but this was number two, right behind it.
Hmm.
Again, you know, seeing the actual twisters themselves on screen, they're fun. How many tickets were sold by like the shot of the cow flying through the air in the trailer,
Yep.
or I remember the trailers that had the shot of like uh, the shot of the tire crashing through the windshield,
Hmm.
which is just a visual effects test, but it was so good that they were like, put it in the trailer, even if it's not in the movie, you can put it in the trailer and we'll promote it. But it was also kind of like the first big kickoff movie of the summer. That was a big deal. Again, Bill Paxton in a starring role, Helen Hunt,
Hmm.
kind of ascending to the big screen after being a sitcom star for a few years. Um, it's a movie that still holds up. It's a movie that I see playing on one of my cable channels almost all the time.
Yep.
Certainly, I've seen it a crap ton of times at the drive-in in the past couple of years because the scene where the Twister comes to the drive-in made it an instant drive-in classic, and they'll still play it even because of that. It's just a
Hmm.
lot of fun, and they always keep saying, we're going to do a reboot or sequel or what have you to Twister, and hopefully they pull it off because I think a lot of goodwill for the first movie will make whatever new installment they have will give it a little bit of goodwill. So
Yeah, I would agree. Though I do say that if you were going to, I would hope you do something on kind of sort of like a sequel-esque type of thing versus a reboot, just
sure,
because of there are some of those people, that are irreplaceable, if you will, because
yep,
clearly you're never going to be able to replace Bill Paxton.
or
We have
Philip
an,
Seymour Hoffman.
I was gonna say, and a very for me at the time in '96 or whatever, this is my introduction to Philip Seymour Hoffman,
Hmm.
and a character and a performance that is no way able to be replicated. I think
He is
so.
peak sidekick in that
He
movie.
absolutely is. So this would be one of those ones where if they ever did venture down that road, tread lightly because it is, especially here in the Midwest, it is very held dear to a lot of people's hearts.
It is
Be
sacred.
It is sacred. Be respectful to the original. I would say I would if you were going to go that route, go sequel versus a reboot and whatnot.
Yep.
Speaking of reboots, or not reboots or remakes, whatever the case is, it's War of the Worlds, the Tom Cruise led movie coming in at number five at $235.28 million because Tom Cruise likes to go big. So what's bigger than War of the Worlds? So might as well go and do that, right?
Yep. Tom Cruise plus aliens. It's surprised it took that long for it to happen, but it
Yep.
did. And again, this was a movie that, not unlike Independence Day, they really promoted it on the here's all the disaster explosions that are going to happen once the aliens finally decide to invade, because they come up from under the earth and things go boom, and Tom
Hmm.
Cruise and Dakota Fanning are running around and screaming and so forth. It sold itself.
Yeah. And this is one of the earlier performances of Dakota Fanning too, correct?
Yep, yep. I think she did a handful of things, but she had graduated pretty quickly to the point where like she's, you know, arguably like the second lead in
Yeah.
a Spielberg Tom Cruise movie, which is no small
Right.
feat. So
Yeah. All I can just remember is little Dakota Fanning playing young Reese Witherspoon in Sweet Home Alabama. Um, and then we got the Dakota Fanning we have of today.
yep.
All right, we go into number six, World War Z. We go from Tom Cruise to Brad Pitt, $202.36 million. Um, the one thing I find fascinating about this one here, I never finished the book that this is based off of, but the fact that of this movie that we have here, it's nothing like the book because the book is written like Bram Stoker's Dracula, where it's all
Yep.
written in letter form and
Yep.
correspondence. And this is only a port. This movie was only based off of a small segment of that entire book. So I'm actually kind of surprised we haven't gotten World War Z 2 by now yet, actually.
Well,
Um,
I mean, Yeah, I mean, and they've actually flirted with it. I mean, you might
Hmm.
recall that there are the reports that Brad Pitt was trying to get David Fincher to direct World War Z 2. That
Ooh.
was being flirted around for a little bit. I can understand why Fincher wouldn't necessarily do it, but and yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. This movie does take a lot of liberties, with the name. People might even remember that they completely scrapped the original third act of this movie and completely reshot it and rewrote
Hmm.
it, because the original third act did not test well with audiences. So again, this is a movie not unlike Titanic, where it had a lot of like bad buzz going into it. But again, this is also kind of like at peak zombie, resurgence.
Yep.
Because The Walking Dead is only a couple years old at this point. Zombies are kind of becoming the end thing again, and this movie was able to benefit from that immensely.
Definitely. I know. I thoroughly enjoy, even though that I know it takes a lot of liberties from the story. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I do think it is one of those ones where I think it could have been easily a multi-film franchise easily since 2013, and I'm just kind of surprised they just haven't executed on it well enough.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if they ultimately get to it. I mean, again, we're coming up on a nearly a full decade since the first movie came out, which is kind of the kiss of death if you want to try and make a sequel, because then everybody will think, you took too long. So I wouldn't be surprised if nothing does happen, but
Yeah.
if they wanted to go to that well again, they probably could do pretty well for themselves.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, you not to go off topic, but you say the 10 years, the kiss of death kind of thing, and the first thing I immediately thought was, is I'm waiting for the 20-year reunion so I can get the second sequel to Zombieland, because now I think doing it every 10 years just works perfect for me.
That would be. I actually was watching a little bit of Zombieland Double Tap on cable on Friday night, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it was fun to see them all together again." And
Hmm.
made a third one. I'd probably show up for that too. So
I would absolutely show for that, and I would absolutely be completely okay waiting the 10 years from 2 to 3 just for that exact same reason.
yep.
All right, we go into number 7, the Michael Bay extravaganza of Armageddon at 201.58 million dollars. The Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, like again, this is one of those ones where it's I like the fact that a lot of these disaster movies is like, all right, in order for us to get this pulled, we have to have a star-studded cast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, we have Michael Clark Duncan, and we have
Buscemi,
Buscemi,
Liv
Owen
Tyler.
Wil Owen Wilson,
Yep. Billy
um,
Bob. A lot.
Billy Bob.
A lot of these. Because like Ben Affleck, when he made this movie, he was just coming off of Goodwill Hunting, so
Hmm.
he was just starting to become a big thing. Obviously, this is the movie that started Michael Clark Duncan's career as an
Yep.
actor, because Bruce Willis kind of brought him in for that. Billy Bob Thornton again. He's also coming right off of Sling Blade. Just perfect timing on a lot of these people getting that exposure in a movie like this, to pull that off.
Yeah.
And again, also certainly Michael Bay's biggest hit to date, where that kind of enables him to do a lot of bigger movies in his career right after this, including his next movie, which was Pearl Harbor, which at the time was basically like well, Titanic works, so we're going to try this again, but with World War II, and make that work. So, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So then we go from Armageddon, we go into Godzilla, the Matthew Broderick, because in 2014, what you?
No, no, this is not. This is the Bryan Cranston Quicksilver
Oh,
and Scarlet
you're
Witch
right.
one.
Wow,
Yep.
you're absolutely correct. I'm only like 16 years late when I said that, didn't I? Wow, you are absolutely correct. I saw your finger go up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. No, that's right. T- Uh, that's right. Bryan Cranston's. Oh yes.
Yes, the start of
200.
the start of the MonsterVerse.
The start of the MonsterVerse, 200.68 million dollars. That just goes to show, like, part of me remembers that movie, but the other part of me is like, I don't know. There's something about, I think part of it is we got in Roland Emmerich, and so my brain immediately went to the wrong
Yep.
Godzilla.
Yeah, I will say for plausibility's sake, the 1998 Roland Emmerich Godzilla was number 15 on this Box Office Mojo list. So not too
Nice.
far away, but just enough.
Just enough. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't have thought that, you know, did how do they quantify this? How do everything else? I mean, okay, I guess they're zombies or monsters, I guess, or whatever. I this isn't the first one. I think just because there's lots of destruction. I assume this is a disaster movie.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, he's stomping on buildings. Buildings are going down. All that sort of stuff. That dates back all the way to when they had the guys in the rubber suits doing it on like those cardboard city landscapes. That's just part and parcel of it. And obviously that continued through like even like Godzilla versus Kong. They're fighting in
Hmm.
the streets and they're destroying stuff. It kind of all plays out like that. So that makes sense to me.
You know, you said something that made me have a light bulb moment here in terms of the top 10 of what we've talked about here so far.
Hmm.
You stopped and buildings fell and all this stuff and whatnot. And I'm sitting here going, where's the Superman movies? Where's the first
Well,
Avengers movie? Because all of that, like, you know,
Well, I mean, yes, a lot of buildings do fall down and go boom in those. I mean, that basically ended up being one of the major plot points of Batman v Superman is look how you destroyed Metropolis trying to defeat General Zod.
yep.
And Superman, of course, goes to trial for that. And Holly Hunter drinks the peach tea and everything goes exploding and all that stuff. I mean, when you think about it, the fact that much of Batman v Superman is kind of devoted to just what a disaster, like a physical disaster, the end of Man of Steel was, kind of makes sense. But then
Hmm.
again, we don't think of comic book movies as disaster
Disaster
movies.
movies,
But
right?
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. It's like if the monsters can be part of the disasters, the superheroes definitely should be. But I mean, that's not to take away from Godzilla. I mean, Godzilla is great. Like you said, this is the start of the new monster verse that is still going strong. I'm not quite sure where we're going past Godzilla versus Kong,
Well,
but I'm
well,
still looking forward to what's going to happen.
yeah, I mean, we kind of know because they just announced the new Apple TV Plus Godzilla series,
Oh, that's
which is
right.
part of the MonsterVerse. In terms of the big screen, who the heck knows at this point? But we definitely know it's going to continue on in some fashion.
Yeah, you can't tell me that they're not going to have the success they have had with those and tell me, be like, oh yeah, we're done. There'll be more. Um, Coming in at number 9, we have The Day After Tomorrow, $186.74 million. Again, uh, I, I've always found this movie fascinating. I don't know if it's something. It's not one that I typically go back to on a regular basis and whatnot. But maybe that's because I live in South Dakota, where everything is cold during the winter, and I don't want to revisit the cold that often.
Yeah, I mean, again, first off, this is the second and final Emmerich movie in our
Hmm.
list, which again kind of surprised me when I pulled up this list. I'm thinking like, oh, Emmerich's gonna have a ton of movies in here, and I'm like, nope, not with the slightly more liberal definition of disaster
Right.
as what I thought there would. So there is that. Um, in terms of not revisiting it, I can kind of understand that because this is probably one of the least straight out fun movies in the Emmerich library. Because certainly, like even like later on movies like 2012, for example,
Hmm.
has like some more very avidly ridiculous scenes in it, like the scene I always go back to when John Cusack drives the limousine through the earthquake.
It's exactly the
Um,
one I immediately go to.
Yep, So the day after tomorrow didn't really lean into that ridiculousness the way that later Emmerich movies did.
Yep.
It still has a lot of great weather-related disaster in it. I can't argue with that.
Yep.
And again, some some solid casting because again that was early Jake Gyllenhaal, like
Hmm.
only a few years after Donnie Darko and Bubble Boy, kind of shaping into like a big star as it were.
Yep.
So it certainly did fine for what it is. You know, again, cemented the Emmerich brand, which is probably important because that's probably along with Independence Day. This is probably an important stepping stone of how we got to having a movie like Moonfall in our orbit in the first place because,
Hmm.
it's Emmerich's brand.
I would also like to point out that if it wasn't for The Day After Tomorrow, we might not necessarily have the cinematic classic Team America World Police.
That's fair. Yes, because as some of you might know, originally Trey Parker and Matt Stoddard wanted to do a shot for shot, word for word remake of The Day After Tomorrow, but with marionette puppets. And when Fox Legal shut that down, they're like, oh, well, we'll just make an original movie with puppets instead, which is how we got Team America. So,
Which is completely okay because it has one of the best amazing soundtracks of all time.
yep.
So
And
I will take us having The Day After Tomorrow and be somewhat forgettable, just simply so I can have a very memorable movie.
exactly. Well put. Well put.
Coming in at number 10, another one that is for me is kind of forgettable one. In fact, I've never actually seen. A Perfect Storm coming in $182.6 million, June of 2000. This is the George Clooney one, right?
Yep, this is George
Okay.
Clooney and Mark Wahlberg and John C. Riley as fishermen who get caught up in a massive storm and ultimately die at sea. Um, again, it's a pretty solid movie. Again, it's like a lot of the other movies that we talked about in this list. This is one that was kind of made by marketing because, like, the trailer and even the poster art and movie covers of like Blu-ray and DVD, etc., all highlight that shot of like the boat sailing up toward the wave,
Yep.
which is a big deal. Again, this is relatively early George Clooney because like this was like right after he had left ER and started to focus solely on his movie career. Um, I believe this was the second movie in less than a year that he had made with Mark Wahlberg because they had done Three Kings the
Hmm.
previous fall, and they did not work together again after this, if I'm not mistaken. Um, wonder why. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, as a summertime movie, it did what it needed to do. I haven't watched it in a long time as well, although I know it does show up on cable from time to time as well. Yeah, it was just perfect storm, perfect timing, I guess.
I guess that's the way to put it.
So,
All right. Well, that has been our top 10 disaster movies um, for the box office here. Some very interesting, a very dynamic group of movies, I think, because of what Box Office Mojo is determining as a disaster movie.
yep,
Um,
I
so
can't.
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, I like I said, I can't complain with any of their arguments necessarily, and some of them are a little bit loose, but it
Hmm.
kind of makes sense to me in retrospect. So,
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, have you come up and decided what we're gonna do here next week, or or
yes,
do we only get some clues, maybe?
yes, we definitely know what we're doing next week. So, this week we covered Moonfall because that's one of the movies coming out this weekend. The other movie coming out this weekend is, of course, as we talked about in the main show, Jackass Forever.
Hmm.
So you and I have talked about this before. Next week we're going to cover the top 10 movies at the box office made by our folks at MTV Films, which
Nice.
will also be a very eclectic list, a very nostalgic list. It's not just going to be Jackass movies. I've done some peeking already. Um, a lot of random stuff there from our use. That'll just be really fun to look at. So
Definitely. I do know that one of them that won't make the list just because it's the first and foremost and whatnot. We won't get the Jerry Connell led Joe's Apartment, but that's okay.
nope, nope. It only made 4 million when I checked on the list, which is actually more than I thought it made back in the day. But
Right.
so it is.
All right. Well, that has been the box office bonus episode of this week. Be sure to check us out every week and every Monday when we drop off the regular box office here. Otherwise, we will check you out here next week.
See ya.